Thank you. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Balabha Girivaradari. Gopi Jana Balabha Girivaradari. Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Balabha Girivaradari. Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jayom Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajikacharya Asatara Satashri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Shri Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Go Gopinath Shai Mukunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dhamma Ki Jai, Mathura Dhamma Ki Jai, Navadvip Mayapur Dhamma Ki Jai, Jagannath Puri Dhamma Ki Jai, Ganga Maya Jamuna Devi Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai, Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Gaur Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya. Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Sarasvati Deve Gauravani Pacharane Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paskachade Shatarane Vande Ham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raganatam Vitam Stam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sadvadutam Parijana Sahita Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha Vanchakalpatubhishcha Kripasandhviyavacha Patichanam Pavanevyo Vaishnavebi Namo Namaha. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So it's January 11th, 2026 in New Goloka, Hillsborough, North Carolina, and we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 70, Text 32. Shri Sukha Uvacha Rajadute Bravatevam Devarshi Paramaduti Bibrat Pinga Jatabharam Prarasidhyata Ravi. Please chant. Shri Sukha Uvacha Rajadute Bravatevam Devarshi Paramam Duti Bibrat Pinga Jatabaram Pradurashidhyata Ravi. Shri Sukha Uvacha Rajadute Bravatevam Devarshi Padamaduti Bibrat Pinga Jatabhadam Pradurashidhyata Ravi. Shri Sukha Uvacha Rajadute Bravatevam Devarshi Padamaduti Ti Pradam Pradurashidhyata Ravi. Shri Sukha Uvacha. Shukdev Goswami said, Raja of the kings, Dute, the messenger, Bruvati, having spoken, Evam, in this manner, Deva, of the demigods, Rishihi, the sage Narada Muni, Padama, supreme, Jutihi, whose effulgence, Bibrat, wearing, Pinga, yellowish, Jata, of matted locks, Bharam, a mass, Padurasit, appeared, Yata, like, Ravihi, the sun. BBT translation. Shukadev Goswami said, when the king's messenger had thus spoken, the sage of the demigods, Narada, suddenly appeared, bearing a mass of golden matted locks on his head. The supremely effulgent sage entered like the brilliant sun. Must have been something to see, yeah? I actually recently saw a painting of this with Narada with golden matted locks. So there's no BBT purport. I'm going to read the translation from Krishna book. At the very moment the messenger of the imprisoned kings was presenting their appeal before the Lord, the great sage Narada arrived. Because he was a great saint, his hair was dazzling like gold, and when he entered the assembly house, it appeared that the sun god was personally present in the midst of the assembly. Commentary by Srila Jiva Goswami. At this time, he was manifesting more effulgence than ever, Paramadutihi. This was arranged by the Lord so that people would listen to his words. Srila Sanatana Goswami's commentary. When the messenger of the kings was speaking in this way, Evam, and the Lord did not say anything in response, Narada appeared, so that the Lord would first go to Yudhisthira's house. Narada was shining, or had great power, and had golden hair. He was like the sun. In this way he appeared, so that, by showing his nature, his words would be accepted. Or he was joyful that his desired Rajasuya sacrifice would be performed when the Lord would come to Yudhisthira's house. Or Sukadeva describes him in this way because he was filled with bhakti for him, since he came there on behalf of Yudhisthira. Or Narada was radiant with great power of austerity, Padamadutihi. This indicates his omniscience. Knowing the Lord would go to Yudhisthira's house, he came there to hasten the events. The power of his austerity is indicated by his shining hair. He was like the sun, most powerful or most worthy of worship. Shri Sukha Uvacha Rajadute Bravachevam Devarshi Padamaduti Bibrat Pinga Jata Bharam Pradur Ashid Yata Ravihi. Sukadeva Goswami said, when the king's messenger had thus spoken, the sage of the demigods Narada suddenly appeared, bearing a mass of golden matted locks on his head. The supremely effulgent sage entered like the brilliant sun. So here we see that Narada Muni is manifesting this effulgence like the sun, as Srila Jiva Goswami and Srila Sanatana Goswami say, so that people would listen to him, so that they would respect him. Oh, here's a very powerful personality. So we only retain things that have interest to us. If we hear something that doesn't interest us in some way, or that we don't feel is useful to us in some way, we will not remember it. Do we all have this experience? Right? Do we all take classes in school that maybe even we got A+ on and we don't remember one bit of it? Even a week after the class is over, like, what was that? I don't know. Right? I have no idea. And having faith in what we hear, faith that this thing that I'm learning, this thing I'm reading, this thing I'm hearing, it's going to be a benefit to me. It's going to be useful. It's true. It's beneficial. It's useful. It's the main criteria for learning anything. It's the main criteria for Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. I mean, Srila Rupa Goswami talks about the qualifications for taking up sadhana. He talks about you can't be too attached or too detached. And he also says you have to have some taste for Krishna. But he also says that how much knowledge and faith you have in Shastra is your qualification for taking up Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. Why? Because Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti is based on the vidhi of the scripture. And if you don't know the vidhi of the scripture, or you don't believe the vidhi of the scripture, your ability to follow the process is going to be impeded. Right? If you want to follow a recipe and you don't believe it's a good recipe, you're going to have trouble with it. Sometimes someone even asks us, right? I'm sure we all have this experience. Someone asks us for advice, but they don't really believe us. They don't really have faith in us. And so even though we spend time to give advice, what do we say? In one ear and out the other, falling on deaf ears, talking to a wall, right? It's really dependent on faith. Now, it is primarily the responsibility of the teacher to build that faith. We have a lot of people who teach, they just say, well, I'm just going to throw out content here. I'm just going to throw out information. Bad teacher. Yes. And it's up to the students. They have to figure out why they want it and what they're going to do with it. But if a good teacher is going to take, right, Marsh, we had all these lessons on this many years ago, that it's ultimately the teacher's responsibility, at least from the teacher's point of view. The teacher should think, whether or not people learn is my responsibility. Of course, the student should think, whether or not I learn is my responsibility. And if that doesn't happen, though, if there's no faith, if there's no motivation to learn, then everybody's just wasting their time. Nothing's actually transpiring. So we're going to look first at two things from the teacher's perspective, good and bad, so that Krishna himself, all of our acharyas, they all build faith and interest, like Narada Muni's coming here manifesting his effulgence. And our building of faith and interest as a teacher should be for Krishna's glorification, for Krishna's service, not for our own ego. And then we're going to look at from the point of view of the student, how we can discriminate where to put our faith and interest. Okay, so from the point of view of the teacher, I thought of several examples. Perhaps some of you can think of more. And the one that really jumped out of me is from CC Adi 7, 60, and 61. Anybody know what happens there in Adi 7? Yeah? And what else? What happens there that's right connected to today's verse about Narada Muni? By the way, that book was published separately from the whole CC. Was published first. Yes. And what happens in there? That was a really pivotal book for me in my own spiritual life. I basically inhaled that book and used it in my preaching. Okay, well, I'll read the verses. This is 1661 of Adi 7. After sitting on the ground, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu exhibited his mystic power by manifesting an effulgence as brilliant as the illumination of millions of suns. When the sannyasis saw the brilliant illumination of the body of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, their minds were attracted, and they all immediately gave up their sitting places and stood in respect. So who was Lord Chaitanya preaching to here? Prakasananda Saraswati, Mayavadis. And they already had an attitude about him, didn't they? They had a bad attitude about him. They thought, oh, this is some sentimentalist. He doesn't study Vedanta. He's just going around chanting and dancing in the streets. Right? So he comes and he sits where? In a dirty, by the shoes. He's sitting by the shoes. But then he shows this effulgence. He shows actually his Brahmajyoti more than even the sun. And they're like, whoa, this is a special person. And they switch, everything switches. They switch from having a condescending attitude towards him to having a receptive attitude towards him. Because he's going to tell them that they're all wrong. That's what he's going to tell them. He's going to tell them, you're all wrong. Everything you're doing is wrong. Your whole perspective is wrong. So he's establishing himself here as an authority. We have a similar thing that happens in Bhagavatam 8:18, 20 to 22, and 25. Anyone have any idea what's there? Again, we have this manifesting of an effulgence of the Lord. Anyone know? 8th canto. No. Chapter 18. Okay, I'm going to read these verses. When the Lord heard that Bali Maharaj was performing Ashrameda sacrifices under the patronage of Brahmanas belonging to the Bhrigu dynasty, the Supreme Lord, who is full in every respect, proceeded there to show his mercy to Bali Maharaj. By his weight, he pushed down the earth with every step. Well, that's pretty interesting, right? Somebody walked in the temple room and every step they took, the whole temple shook. We'd probably pay attention. While engaged in performing the sacrifice in the field known as Bhrigu Kacha on the northern bank of the Narmada River, the Brahminical priests, the descendants of Bhrigu, saw Vamandev to be like the sun rising nearby. O king, because of Vamandev's bright effulgence, the priests, along with Bali Maharaj and all the members of the assembly, were robbed of their splendor. Thus they began to ask one another whether the sun god himself, Sanat Kumara, or the fire god, had personally come to see the sacrificial ceremony. Vamandev entered the arena of sacrifice. His brilliant effulgence diminished the brilliance of all the priests and their disciples, who thus stood from their seats and welcomed the Lord properly by offering obeisances. So again, they immediately got in a mood of this is somebody that we want to respect. Krishna does this, of course, by showing the universal form. He shows the universal form to Duryodhana and his assembly when he's going there to mediate for peace. And of course, he also shows the universal form at Arjuna's request to establish his authority. Now, it's not just what you look like, but also what you say. Like Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 4:1, I instructed this imperishable science to the sun god Vivaswan, and Vivaswan instructed it to Manu, the father of mankind, and Manu in turn instructed it to Ishvaku. He's establishing his authority. So I've spent some time thinking, why do we introduce speakers? We introduce a speaker if the audience doesn't know the speaker, or in an advertisement for a seminar, you'll introduce the speaker to generate faith. Correct? Right? I mean, sometimes it's a little awkward. You're sitting on the seat and somebody's saying, oh, you've done this and you've done that and you've done this other thing. But that actually establishes faith. Why should we listen to you? Why should we hear what you have to say? In our Career Dharma book, we were asked by some of our test readers, write something about the authors so that we know on what authority are you writing this book. And we actually decided to write an extended section for each of us about what was our experience both with bhakti and with career. Srila Prabhupada would establish his bona fides often by talking about how he was coming in a proper parampara, how he was following his spiritual master. This was a repeated theme from Srila Prabhupada. I'm not making this up. I'm not just saying this. I'm coming in parampara. I am representing the line of parampara. I mean, sometimes I see devotees in our movement want to try to understand Prabhupada completely separately from the parampara. But that's not how Prabhupada presented himself. He was saying, my authority comes from the parampara. And Prabhupada would quote so many verses. You know, you have some purports where Prabhupada's quoting Shastra after Shastra after Shastra after Shastra. You should believe me because I'm quoting from Shastra. Srila Prabhupada explains, we're right now teaching Nectar Devotion, and Prabhupada explains that Nectar Devotion is accepted for 3 reasons. That Srila Rupa Goswami is following Bharat Muni, that he was instructed by Lord Chaitanya, and that he's copiously quoting from Shastras for every single point that he's making, that he has some authority. Right? We have Lord Ramachandra, who shot through those 7 trees, right, to convince Sugriva that he was going to be competent enough to fight with Bali, because Sugriva's like, well, I don't know. Are you actually going to be competent? Of course, there's other ways to establish faith. Our knowledge. Srila Prabhupada wanted us to have Shastric degrees. You know, just like if you're going to speak on something, you have an academic degree. But Prabhupada wanted us to have degrees, Bhakti Shastri, Bhakti Vaibhava, Bhakti Sarvabhauma, Bhakti Vedanta. Why? To establish our credibility. So people won't just say, well, who are you? Why should I pay any attention to you? And also, of course, our integrity. Prabhupada writes in Bhagavatam 3.21 purport, a teacher cannot teach the public to stop smoking if he himself smokes. So we also establish credibility and faith by our own behavior. And it's a real problem when we don't have integrity, right? We have, every religious system runs into this problem, and we're not an exception to this. I mean, there was recently some very famous Christian author and speaker, and it was discovered that he was having some illicit affair for years, and people are like throwing his books in the trash. Why should we listen to anything you say if you can't walk your talk? And our appearance. So I gave a whole class on this recently in Vrindavan. The Prabhupada says, first dress, then address. And we see here Narada Muni, right? He's the sage, so as a sage, a part of his appearance is that he has matted hair. And so his beautiful golden matted hair in his appearance. So how we present ourselves, and of course that's going to depend on what is the audience and so forth, but to dress nicely. And Srila Prabhupada, when he first took Vanaprastha and he was staying at a Gaudiya Math temple in Delhi, he said to the leaders there, how can I go and preach when my dhotis have holes in them? He said, I have to have proper dhotis without holes. And I think it was Rishi Kumar tells the story of how Prabhupada was given a nice kurta to wear before he went on a big engagement. And Prabhupada puts it on, and then he's looking in a mirror, and he twirls around in the mirror, and he says, yes, first dress, then address. So a very charming story. However, building faith in order to teach should be for the purpose of connecting people with Krishna and the parampara and the shastra, not for our own ego. That, oh, well, I'm going to manipulate these things. I'm going to manipulate my appearance and so forth and what I'm putting out so people will trust me on my own. So Prabhupada writes in his purport to Adi 761, where it's about Mahaprabhu manifesting this effulgence. He says, to draw the attention of common men, sometimes saintly persons, acharyas and teachers exhibit extraordinary opulences. This is necessary to attract the attention of fools, but a saintly person should not misuse such power for personal sense gratification like false saints who declare themselves to be God. Even a magician can exhibit extraordinary feats that are not understandable to common men, but this does not mean the magician is God. It is a most sinful activity to attract attention by exhibiting mystic powers and then to utilize this opportunity to declare oneself to be God. A real saintly person never declares himself to be God, but always places himself in the position of a servant of God. For a servant of God, there is no need to exhibit mystic powers, and he does not like to do so. But on behalf of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, a humble servant of God performs his activities in such a wonderful way that no man can dare try to act like him. Yet a saintly person never takes credit for such actions because he knows very well that when wonderful things are done on his behalf by the grace of the Supreme Lord, all credit goes to the master and not to the servant. So I was talking about my experience with Adi 7. So when I first read Adi 7, I'd only been in the movement a few months, and it was the conversation between Mahaprabhu and these Mayavadis. And there's point by point, the Mayavadi point and the refutation, the Mayavadi point and the refutation, the Mayavadi point and the refutation. And, I practically memorized it at the time. I don't know, it's the kind of thing I really like. So there was a Sunday feast. This was in the temple in Evanston, in a suburb of Chicago. And there was one Indian gentleman came to the Sunday feast, and he sat down and talked to me while we were taking prasadam. So at this time, I was 18 years old, right? And he starts giving all these Mayavadi arguments. Boom, boom, boom. I counteracted each of them right out of Adi 7, right out of Mahaprabhu's statements, right out of Srila Prabhupada's purports. Everything he brought out, I could immediately counteract it, right? And at the end of the discussion, he looked at me. He said, "You're the most intelligent person I have ever met." And I said, "Not one bit of this is my intelligence." I said, "This is all Srila Prabhupada and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu." It was actually a very faith-building experience for me. And he ended up becoming a devotee. Wow. Yeah, it was actually a super transformative experience for me. How wonderful it is when the credibility that we're establishing, as is explained by Srila Sanatana Goswami, that the Lord is empowering Narada to have this effulgence. So all of our credibility, even our clothes, is all coming from Krishna. That everything is the manifestation of Krishna. And I'm acting as Krishna's servant to give people not exactly faith in me, but I'm trying to give them faith in our acharyas. I'm trying to give them faith in Krishna. But we have to be careful not to misuse this, because when we're empowered by the Lord, we can think, oh, now I'm empowered by the Lord. I can use this empowerment for my own purposes. So we have some examples of this misuse. Anyone think of some examples of people who misuse their empowerment in Shastra? Durvasa Muni. Yes, he had so many powers. He could create a monster from his hair. I think it was his hair. Yes, and he misused that to try to kill a devotee who drank some water before him. Imagine being so offended by somebody taking a sip of water that you want to kill them. Okay. Any other examples you can think of? Sukracharya. Yes. He misuses his powers to try to tell Bali not to surrender to Vamandev. I'm thinking specifically about exhibiting power to bewilder others. Okay, so one example is from Krishna book, chapter 56. When Shatrajit wore this jewel in a locket around his neck, he appeared exactly like the sun, just like Narada Muni here is appearing like the sun. We have the word Ravi, he appears like the brilliant sun. Putting on this jewel, he entered the city of Dwarka, and people thought that the sun god had come to see Krishna. They thought, oh, here he's the sun god. Another example I was thinking is from Bhagavatam 4.2.5. When Daksha, the leader of the Prajapatis, entered that assembly, his personal bodily luster as bright as the effulgence of the sun, the entire assembly was illuminated, and all the assembled personalities became insignificant in his presence. So he had this effect also. But how did he use it? He used it to criticize Lord Shiva. He used it to think, I'm actually greater than Lord Shiva, who's just my son-in-law. Prabhupada writes in Nectar Devotion, chapter 1, talking about the mystic powers. He says, another perfection is called Vashita, and by this perfection one can bring anyone under his control. This is a kind of hypnotism which is almost irresistible. Sometimes it is found that a yogi who may have attained a little perfection in this Vasita mystic power comes out among the people and speaks all kinds of nonsense, controls their minds, exploits them, takes their money, and goes away. Right? But we have to be careful. And please, we shouldn't think that this only applies, well, this applies to Satyajit and this applies to Daksha. We have this problem even in our own movement. It's called pastoral abuse. Yes? You familiar with this? That because of somebody's austerity, because of somebody's effulgence, I remember we had one leader in our Hare Krishna movement who was very visibly effulgent. I remember being at a Rath Yatra. Before the Rath Yatra started, I saw him walking across the street, and I was like, whoa. They actually used to call him a name that had the word sun in it. And you remember, you know who I'm talking about. Oh, yeah. But he actually looked like that. I mean, he really did. He was really bright and glowing. And he used that to manipulate one lady. And this has happened in our own movement, my dear friends. It happens, it's still happening. It's not like and it's going to continue to happen. It's not like it's going to go away. So people get some learning, they get some power by austerity, they get some effulgence, they get some respect, they have some certifications and whatever, and then they, instead of using that to build faith in Shastra and using that to build faith in Krishna and using that in service, then they use it for their personal aggrandizement. They use it to manipulate people. That's not impossible. It's not impossible. We have demons. They do a lot of austerities and some kind of sadhana. I mean, Hiranyakashipu did a pretty intense sadhana and austerities, for some purpose of manipulating and being a controller. So it's something that we have to be careful about. It's not something we should think, well, that can't happen to me. It's a problem. Actually, this is one of the anarthas. One of the anarthas is explained in Madhurya Kadambini by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, is anarthas caused by bhakti, kind of. That because by bhakti you get some potency, you get some power, you get some respect. And you can think, oh, now it's mine. Now it's mine to enjoy. Right? That one time, I know of a case where one devotee was very angry at someone, and he was like, I want to break something. So he took his books and threw them all over the floor. And I said, why did you do that? And he thought, well, I was thinking they were my books, so I had the right to do that. And I said, no, it's not like that. I said, they're your books to take care of, not your books to throw all over the floor in anger. Go out and chop some wood instead, If you want to break something, cut up some firewood. So we think like this. I mean, C.S. Lewis writes about this in Screw Tape Letters. He says that what we have is ours to take care of. It's our quota given by the Lord for us to take care of. It's not something given to us that now I can do with this whatever I like. Of course, what happens when we take the gifts of the Lord and use it for our own sense gratification is Krishna will often do what with those gifts? Take them away. If you give toys to your kid to play with and they use it to hit their brother over the head, you're going to take the toy away, at least temporarily. All right, what about from the other point of view? What about from the point of view of the hearer, of the learner? How do we tell where to put our faith? How do we tell where to put our interest? Well, as I was saying, Prabhupada always established his authority in terms of being parampara. And I remember Satsrupa Maharaj one time saying that he was preaching to a gentleman who said, oh, I'm a spiritual master. And Satsrupa Maharaj says to him, well, that's very interesting. Who's your master? He said, well, I don't have any. I'm a self-effulgent master. And he's like, well, a master without a master is claiming to be God. So we shouldn't hear from anyone who doesn't come in the line of authority. We're actually dealing with this in the present day, that there's someone going around preaching to our devotees who isn't coming in any parampara, doesn't have any authority of his own, and he's coming out with his own theories about Gaudiya Vaishnava philosophy. So we should only hear from people who actually are coming in parampara, who have some authority, who've actually heard from someone. Strotyam Brahma Nishtam. Strotyam, they have to have heard. And anything anyone teaches, they should be able to back up with Shastra. They should be able to back up with some authority. I mean, it's fine if you want to say sometimes in some context, well, this is just my personal experience. Prabhupada would say that sometimes about some things. But that's not an absolute statement. You understand what I'm saying? If Prabhupada said, well, I have this personal experience, that's not a universal, absolute kind of thing. Prabhupada's just talking about some limited experience. And we could also say that, well, this is in my experience. But we should hear that differently. If someone's just speaking from anecdotal experience, that's very different than something that can be backed up with Shastra. And please don't be afraid to ask somebody, oh, that's wonderful. That's really nice. That's so enlivening. I'd like to know where I can find that to read more about it. I mean, I was hearing from one of our preachers a few years ago. He told some story, and I thought, wow. And I went up to him afterwards, and I said, where's that from? And he was kind of like, why are you asking me? And I said, well, I'd like to read the whole story. I'd like to look it up. And then he said, oh, I heard it from so-and-so, but I don't know where he got it from. I said, could you ask him? He said, yeah, I'll see him in a few months. I'll ask him. So I, again, wrote in a few months. I said, did you ask him? No response. So I'm never going to repeat that story. It's like, okay, I don't know where it's coming from. I don't know what its basis is. And people who can explain Shastra in terms of hermeneutics, which is why we teach hermeneutics. I've just been requested again to teach it this summer. I have to decide how I'm going to do my schedule. But we should actually study whether or not someone can explain according to the proper system. And we should look for integrity. It's why we say that one should study a guru for a year. And don't expect a jiva to be God. Okay? Don't expect a jiva to be God. Even a pure devotee, we're going to be running into the next couple of verses where Krishna says to Narada, you know everything. Okay, but Narada doesn't know everything like Krishna knows everything. Narada's not in every atom. He's not in everyone's heart. He doesn't have the kind of omniscience that Krishna has. This is nicely explained in the 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna says to Arjuna, I've passed many births, so have you. I remember all of them, you have not. And Prabhupada says this is a difference between God and even a liberated living entity. If we expect a jiva to be God, our faith is going to be hampered when we find out that they're not God. And ultimately, we have to judge by the personal result in ourself. Do I become purified? How do you tell whether or not it's a good recipe? You make it and see whether or not it turns out. How do you tell whether it's actually good directions? Where do you end up? And I like the verses, Bhagavad Gita 9.2, Raja Vijja Rajaguyam Pavitram Idamuttamam Prachakshaavagamam Dharmam Susukam Kartamaviyam. Am I gaining in knowledge? Am I gaining in wisdom? Guyam, do I understand the essence of things? Pavitram, am I becoming purified? Prachaksha, can I directly perceive my advancement? Dharmyam, is it something authentic? Susukam, am I becoming happy? And then the verse that Prabhupada always quotes in this connection, 11.2.42, that devotion, direct experience of the Supreme Lord, and detachment from other things, these three occur simultaneously for one who has taken shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in the same way that pleasure, nourishment, and relief from hunger come simultaneously and increasingly with each bite for a person engaged in eating. So if I'm not increasing in devotion, if I'm not getting a direct experience of God, if I'm not getting material attachment, then Prabhupada would say either you're not really eating, like you're just chewing gum, or you have parasites in your stomach. So if we're not advancing, then either we're listening to the wrong authority, we're in the wrong process, or we're not following the process properly. And we always need to stay humble, because we can all be fooled. It's possible to be fooled and have faith in someone and respect for someone and find out that they're not actually an authority. And I was thinking here, there's a nice story in Chaitanya Charitamrita Anjalila 5, verses 91 through 158, where a Brahmin poet from Bengal wrote a drama about the characteristics of Lord Chaitanya, and he came to Jagannath Puri and stayed with Bhagavan Acharya. And when he read his drama to the devotees, they all praised it. They said, very good, This is wonderful poetry. Lord Chaitanya should hear it. But it had to go through who? Swarup Damodar. And Swarup Damodar heard it and he says, this is no good at all. He says, the way you're describing Lord Jagannath and Lord Chaitanya is not bona fide. Now, the poet ended up being very humble, and when Swarup Damodar gave him good instruction, he took it and he became purified. But the point is the devotees were fooled, and they thought, oh yes, this is very good, this is very good. So we should always be humble and not immediately think, okay, I always understand exactly who and what to follow. So when we're presenting Krishna consciousness, it's essential not just to give the facts and the information, but also to give people faith in what we're teaching. It's just absolutely essential. If we can't establish faith, then nobody's going to learn anything. And the means we have to establish faith, we should use in service, not for our aggrandizement, and we should be very careful where we put our faith. All that glitters is not gold. So, I have time, Mr. Enthusiasm here. We should call you Utsahadas. So anybody have questions or comments? Yes, Rudrani. Touching their heart, yes. Yes. Well, the main way that people are going to get faith in what we say is if they get these results. We should try that people feel some connection with Krishna, not just as a result of following what we're saying, but while we're saying it. There should be some experience of Krishna, some experience of the truth, because that's the main way that people are going to get faith. And yes. Absolutely. Rudrani's saying at some level they recognize the truth of what's being said. Yes. The most important point. Thank you. Thank you so much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. You just think everyone's wonderful in Hare Krishna, Prabhupada. You just think everything's wonderful. Thank you. I used it for the last thing.
Yeah.
Just for the last thing.
Just the last part.
Just everything else I could find, because, I know most stuff.
Yeah.
But for the last part, I was looking. I couldn't find it. I knew it was there, but I couldn't find it. And then I just asked the question.
Yeah.
Right, boom, boom, boom. I was like, boom. Wow.
So
that was cool.
how was your career Dharma yesterday?
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. I don't think I've ever been in anything where every single thing was perfect. We had if we had had one more person, we wouldn't have been able to put them in there. The venue was first class.
Good.
Padma Gopi catered it. All the snacks, all the prasada were first class.
Good.
There was set up for the projector was first class. Everything.
How many people were there?
24.
That's good.
We couldn't have fit any more people there, literally.
Well, there you go.
Yes.
Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Samasitam Buddha Sundarangam Tandar Agom Vikamaniya Vishesha Shobha Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Angani Yasa Sakale Priya Priti Manti Vasyam Dipan Dikayanti Jiram Naganti Ananda Chinmaya Sadhu Jala Vigrahasya Govindam Adipurusham Amaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Amaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Namaham Bhajami Govindam Adipurusham.
Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Namaniti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gurvani Macha Neke Nivasesha Shunyavade Vasyajavade Satarante Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasati Gauramadurina Chaitanya Shri Krishna Nityananda Prabhu Nityananda Advaita Gadadhara Sivasati Gauramadurina Yes, Shri Krishna Nityananda Prabhu Nityananda Advaita Gadadhara Sivasati Gauramadurina Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hore Hore. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Goloka Nana Rana Goloka Nana Drakate. Jaya Radha Goloka Nana Rana Goloka Nana Drakate. Jaya Radha. Hey, Radhe, 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 Radhe. Jai Om Vishnu Pad. Paramahamsa Charya Satashi Shimad His Divine Grace Chalanam Bhaktivedanta Those Srila Prabhupada ISKCON founder Charya Srila Prabhupada. Then just go to the Vaishnava Charya Srila Prabhupada. Friends, say, oh, Shri Krishna, Chaitanya Prabhu, Nityananda, Shiva, Radha, Shiva, Sangaur, Bhakta, Vrinda, Shri Krishna, Bhakta, Shai, Madhura, Radha, Giri Govardhan, Vijay, Vrindavan, Vijay, Vitaram, Vijay, Swami, Vijay, Shrimani Vasudev, Vijay, Bhakta, Vijay. Lord, praise the
Chaitodharmanamarjanam Bhava Mahadavagni Nirvapanam Shreya Kairavya Chandrika Vitaranam Jiva Karnamrita Swadanam Sarvatma Snapanam Paramvijayate Shri Krishna Sankirtanam Nam Namakari Bahuda Nija Sarva Shaktis Tatrapita Niyamita Smarane Nakala Etadrishita Vakripa Bhagavan Mamapi Dodaiva Midrishami Hajjanina Nuraga Trinadapi Sunichena Tarorapi Suhishuna Amani Namana Dana Kirtaniya Sudahari Nadanam Najanam Nasundarim Kavitam Vajagadisha Kamaye Mama Janmani Janmani Ishvarim Bhavatad Bhaktir Ahoitaki Twaim Ainanda Tanuja Kinkaram Patitam Mam Vishame Bhavam Buddha Kribayata Vabada Pankaja Stita Duli Sadrashim Vachintaya Nayanam Galushu Daraya Vadanam Gat Garugaya Gira Pulakarnishitam Vapukada Tavanamagrahane Bhavishyati Yugayatam Namishena Chakshusha Pravashayatam Shunayatam Jagat Sarvam Govindam Virahiname Ashlishava Padamadamarastumam Adarshanam Marmahatakarotuva Yatatatava Vidadatulam Pato Mat Prananatastusa Eva Napara. Victory to the Sri Krishna Sankirtan, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of conditional life, of repeated birth and death. This Sankirtan movement is the prime benediction for humanity at large because it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss, and it enables us to fully taste the nectar for which we are always anxious. Oh, my Lord, congregational chanting of your holy name alone can render all benediction to living beings, and thus you have hundreds and millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names, you've invested all your transcendental energies. There are not even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. Oh, my Lord, out of kindness you enable us to easily approach you by your holy names, but I am so unfortunate that I have no attraction for them. One should chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than the straw on the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I, they're beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your causeless devotional service, birth after birth. O Son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna, I am your eternal servitor. Yet somehow or other I have fallen into the ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. O my Lord, when will my eyes be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? When will my voice choke up, and when will the hairs of my body stand on end at the recitation of your name? O Govinda, feeling the separation, I am considering a moment to be like 12 years or more.